Hello hockey fans and welcome back to another video. Over the last 48 hours, the 2022 NHL All-Star game in Las Vegas, Nevada has quickly come and gone. With Friday's skills competition featuring a variety of unique events, and with the 3-on-3 tournament taking place on Saturday, the league's most impressive players during the current 21-22 season have certainly put on a show over the weekend. Whilst the All-Star game has become an integral fixture in the NHL's yearly calendar, and whilst the league has been hosting the contest in some shape or form for nearly 80 years now, the NHL's inaugural All-Star game back in 1947 wasn't the first time that the league's greatest players had come together. In fact, there were 3 different contests during the 1930s that would set the stage for the league's future event, the earliest of which took place roughly 13 years prior in 1934. Whilst this initial contest wasn't an official NHL fixture since it wasn't sanctioned by the league, the reasons for holding the event were far less celebratory than the tournament we see today. Whether it was the tragic circumstances that prompted its creation, or the players' desire to rally around one of their own in his time of need, the very first gathering of the NHL's best and brightest was a lot more personal than recent competitions. So what actually happened during this contest? What events led to its creation? Why was it held, and how did it all play out? Well, in today's video, let's take another trip down memory lane and find out. This is the story of the NHL's first All-Star game. Now, in order to understand how this event came about, we must first explore the unfortunate incident that inspired its creation. On December 12, 1933, the Toronto Maple Leafs visited the Boston Bruins for an early year matchup during the 1933-34 NHL season. During the second period of this game, the Maple Leafs had taken a pair of penalties in quick succession and found themselves on a 5-on-3 penalty kill, so they sent out forward Irvin Ace Bailey to take the initial face-off and defend against the Boston power play. During this sequence, Bailey quickly showed why he was one of the best stick handlers across the entire league, as he won the face-off and held the puck for a whole minute of the penalty kill while the Bruins chased him around the ice. After Bailey won another face-off and finally dumped the puck into the Bruins zone, Boston defenseman Eddie Shaw took the puck and led a rush up the ice. However, he was quickly met by Leafs defenseman King Clancy, who body-checked Shaw and disrupted his attempt. As Leafs blue liner Red Horner moved up the ice with the puck, Bailey covered Horner's position on defense, and since he had expertly killed the penalty kill for well over a minute by that point, the forward leaned over for a brief moment in order to catch his breath. Having been knocked to the ice just moments prior, and having failed to generate a scoring chance for his team, Shaw returned to his feet and went looking for revenge. In his angry and somewhat dazed state, Shaw quickly rushed up the ice and threw a huge body check of his own into the first Leafs player he could find, thinking he had gone after Clancy and settled the score. However, Shaw didn't hit Clancy, he had checked Ace Bailey instead. As Shaw slammed into him from behind, the unsuspecting Bailey was sent flying into the air and landed head first onto the ice, which let off a cracking sound that could be heard around the rink and which caused Bailey to quickly lapse into convulsions. When Red Horner asked Shaw what he was doing and Shaw simply smiled in response, Horner threw a single punch which dropped Shaw to the ice and knocked him out cold. Once both players had been carried off the ice, Shaw regained consciousness and immediately went looking for Bailey so he could apologise for his hit. Having found him soon after, and having expressed remorse for his actions, Bailey briefly came to and supposedly responded, "It's all part of the game," before passing out a second time. In the midst of this, Leafs owner Conn Smythe attempted to reach his team's dressing room to see how Bailey was doing, but he was met by a group of angry Bruins fans along the way. After one fan claimed that Bailey had faked his injury, Smythe responded by punching him in the mouth and was later charged with assault due to his actions. Having passed out a second time, Bailey was quickly rushed to a hospital in Boston with a fractured skull, where neurosurgeons worked through the night to try and save his life. In fact, Bailey's injuries were so severe that the doctors expected the worst, giving him just a few hours left to live. Devastated over his son's injuries and furious with Shaw's behaviour, Bailey's father supposedly boarded a train to Boston carrying a revolver in his pocket and telling everyone he met that he intended to kill Shaw. When Smythe learned of his plot, he enlisted the help of his assistant general manager Frank Selke, who quickly got in touch with a friend who worked with the Boston police. As a result, Selke's friend met Bailey's father at a hotel later and talked him out of his plan before sending him back to Toronto. At least one crisis was averted, right guys? Since Shaw's actions had created such dire consequences, authorities in Boston made it clear that they intended to charge Shaw with manslaughter if Bailey died as a result of the incident. Thankfully, neither this outcome nor this course of action would be necessary, as Bailey would pull through the worst of it and survive the ordeal thanks to several successful surgeries. In fact, Bailey would show such steady progress in his recovery that he would be well enough to be transferred home to Toronto by mid-January, less than 6 weeks after the incident took place. In the aftermath of this event, the NHL would quickly absolve the game's referees of any blame, since it would have been nigh impossible for them to have prevented the events that occurred that night. Though Shaw would protest that he was in a dazed state and was not fully conscious of his actions at the time, NHL President Frank Calder suspended Shaw indefinitely from the league, while also handing out a 6-game suspension to Leafs defenseman Red Horner for knocking Shaw out cold. However, once it was assured that Bailey would survive the incident, Shaw's suspension was reduced to 16 games, equal to 1/3 of the regular season at the time. 16 games for almost killing your opponent? Raffi Torres got 41 games for a hit during a preseason game. Hell, Evander Kane got 21 games for a fake vaccine card. I guess the 30s really were a different time, eh, folks? Unfortunately though, while Bailey would face no ramifications from the league, his punishment would be far more severe, as the injuries he suffered forced him to retire immediately after the incident, and he would never play another game for the rest of his career. Having just seen one of their own being forced to hang up his skates prematurely, and with his NHL career all but over at just 30 years old, soon after the incident took place, the Toronto Maple Leafs, the Ottawa Senators and the Montreal Maroons called for a meeting of the league's Board of Governors to determine who would pay for Bailey's recovery and support him financially in his time of need. Once the request was granted and the meeting had concluded, the governors had an idea. Since they were eager to help Bailey as best they could, and having recently watched baseball hold its very first All-Star game, the governors announced that they would host an All-Star exhibition-style game of their own. Unlike the MLB's game though, the NHL's contest would see all of the proceeds go directly to Bailey and his family, whilst the game itself would entail the Toronto Maple Leafs facing off against a team of NHL All-Stars, which consisted of 2 players from each of the league's other 8 teams, chosen by a 3-man committee of League President Frank Calder, New York Rangers owner Frank Patrick, and League Director Thomas Arnold. So after witnessing one of the most tragic and most unfortunate incidents in league history, the hockey community had rallied around Bailey, had created the very first All-Star game in NHL history, and would be holding it in the forward's honour. At least something good came out of all of this, right guys? On February 14th, 1934, the Toronto Maple Leafs and the NHL All-Stars took to the ice of the newly completed Maple Leaf Gardens for the Ace Bailey benefit game and the first All-Star game in NHL history. Though it wasn't an official All-Star game, since the fixture wasn't sanctioned by the league itself, the event featured a lavish pre-game ceremony, including all 31 players getting together at centre ice and having photographs taken in their regular team sweaters, before being presented with special All-Star jerseys by Frank Calder, Lester Patrick, and even Ace Bailey himself. As All-Star goaltender Charlie Gardner stepped out to receive his uniform as the team's number 1, following closely behind him was the All-Stars number 2, Eddie Shaw, a starting defenseman on the team and the culprit behind Bailey's injuries. In fact, it is said that Shaw had been visibly nervous before the game, and it wasn't until Bailey effortlessly stepped out to make his presentations and the crowd gave him a standing ovation that he finally began to relax. As Shaw skated towards Bailey to receive his jersey, the roughly 14,000 fans in attendance went quiet in anticipation for what would happen next. After all, Shaw had broken Bailey's skull, had ended his NHL career, and had almost killed him less than 2 months prior. It certainly would have been understandable if Bailey hadn't quite forgiven him just yet. However, there would be no bad blood between the two former opponents, as the pair looked at each other for a brief moment, shook hands and engaged in conversation. Though what was said during their brief exchange has never been revealed, having seen the pair bury the hatchet and put the past behind them, the crowd soon erupted into loud cheering and thunderous applause. Following this interaction, each of the game's participants were presented with both a medal and a windbreaker jacket, while the fans cheered for every player as they were introduced, including the ones who had previously been unpopular with the Toronto crowd. Once everything had been handed out, Leafs owner Conn Smythe concluded the ceremony by presenting Bailey with a sweater of his own. Not only that, Smythe would also announce that in honour of Bailey's decorated NHL career and his long and successful tenure with Toronto, no other Maple Leafs player would wear Bailey's jersey number ever again, as the team revealed that they had retired his number 6 from use. Not only would this generate another thunderous applause from the crowd, it would mark the first time in both NHL history and in the history of professional sports that a team had retired a player's jersey number. Now that's how you make an announcement, folks. After the pre-game ceremony had concluded and Bailey had dropped the puck for the ceremonial face-off, the NHL's first All-Star game was officially underway, with the contest featuring a star-studded Maple Leafs roster, which included leading scorer Charlie Conacher, productive forward Joe Primo, and reliable defenseman King Clancy, and with the All-Star team featuring such legendary talent as the aforementioned Eddie Shaw, Chicago Blackhawks goaltender Charlie Gardner, and Montreal Canadiens forward Howie Morenz. This showdown between the best of the best was set to become one of the most unique and most exciting games in league history. Though Conacher would be forced to leave the game after an early hit, since he was already suffering from an infected knee, the matchup was a notable departure from the standard regular season game of the time, as it featured very little physical play. That said, what the game lacked in hitting, it most certainly made up for in goal scoring. With Toronto's Baldy Cotton opening the scoring just 4 minutes into the game, and with Leafs forward Busher Jackson doubling the lead just a few minutes later, Boston Bruins forward Nell Stewart would score for the All-Stars to cut the lead in half before the end of the first period. After the second stanza began and the Leafs took an early 3-1 lead thanks to a second goal by Jackson, a stunning score by Montreal's Howie Morenz, and an equaliser by Ottawa Senators winger Frank Finnegan would level the score at 3 apiece midway through the game. However, after the referees mistook a shot that rang off the post as a good goal, the Leafs would take a 4-3 lead into the second intermission thanks to Hap Day's unlikely tally. From there, the third period would be all Toronto. Despite the All-Stars firing a myriad of shots towards Leafs goaltender George Hainsworth, nothing would find its way into the back of the net. Instead, Leafs forward Heck Kilrea would add the insurance marker just 4 minutes into the period. With All-Star coach Lester Patrick abandoning any attempt at defence by playing 5 forwards on the ice, 2 late goals, courtesy of Leafs forwards Ken Doherty and Andy Blair, would seal the deal and give Toronto a 7-3 victory over the NHL All-Stars. Once the final buzzer sounded and the exhibition match had ended, it was revealed that the Ace Bailey benefit game had raised nearly $21,000 for Bailey and his family. Since the Boston Bruins had raised an additional $6,000 of their own during a separate benefit, this brought the total proceeds to an impressive $27,000, approximately $500,000 in today's money. Not only that, Bailey would also present a trophy bearing his name to League President Frank Calder that was commissioned by the Maple Leafs, with the hopes that it would be awarded to the winner of an annual All-Star game that would benefit injured players. However, whilst the league would host 2 additional benefit games in the several years that followed, one in 1937 following the death of Howie Morenz, and the other in 1939 following the premature death of Babe Siebert, Calder never approved the gift, and it was never used as an official NHL award. In fact, it wasn't until 1947 that the league played its first officially sanctioned All-Star game, a whole 13 years after this initial showdown. Whilst this event had brought together the best of the best and had been held to support Bailey and his family, the contest would also have a profound impact on Eddie Shaw. After all, Toronto fans had been actively cheering for him despite him playing for their bitter rivals and being the sole cause of Bailey's injuries. As you can imagine, this unexpected support would surprise Shaw and make him uncharacteristically humble, with him claiming that the cheers from the crowd that day had warmed his heart and that he appreciated them more than any others he had ever received during his entire pro career. Don't you just love a happy ending? In the years following the Ace Bailey benefit game, Bailey would continue to find a place in the hockey world despite his playing career coming to a premature end. After he had tried and failed to become an NHL linesman, Bailey would serve as the head coach of the University of Toronto hockey team, and in 1938 he became an official timekeeper at all Toronto Maple Leaf home games. In fact, Bailey would take his place in the penalty box for nearly half a century, keep time at the NHL's first official All-Star game in 1947, and was inducted into the Hockey Hall of Fame in 1975. On the flip side, Eddie Shaw would remain in the NHL until 1940 and play almost exclusively for the Boston Bruins, before taking ownership of the AHL Springfield Indians, a team he continued to operate until the 1960s. Shaw was also inducted into the Hockey Hall of Fame, but much earlier than Bailey was in 1947. Though the reasons behind its creation were unfortunate to say the least, and though its legacy wouldn't continue in the way that the organisers had intended, the 1934 Ace Bailey benefit game would not only raise a sizable amount of money and ensure that Bailey's unfinished career would be immortalised forever, it would see the league's best and brightest come together for the very first time and lay the foundations for an event that's still going strong to this very day. Add to that the $27,000 raised, his iconic number 6 being retired by the Leafs, and his induction into the Hockey Hall of Fame, and it's truly inspiring to see that so many positives can come from something so somber. I guess the good old days really did have some good after all. And that was the story of the NHL's first All-Star game. What do you guys think about this historical event? Are you surprised to hear how the contest came about, or are you glad that such a tragic event had such a happy ending? Let me know in the comments below, I would love to hear what you guys think. But thank you very much for watching, guys, I hope you have enjoyed. Please feel free to like, subscribe, share, or watch some of my other videos. Thank you very much for watching, and goodbye! A big thank you to Drew Fawcett, Houston NG, and Worthless Pieces for helping support this video via Patreon. If you too want to help support the channel a little bit further and get a shout out at the end of every future video, make sure you head over to patreon.com/oddmanrush and become a patron today.